So let's introduce our next panel as everybody comes on back slowly. Christy Seifert leads the American Soybean Association's Government Affairs team in Washington, D.C. She is a public policy professional, over 25 years of experience in ag policy. This includes serving as staff for the House and Senate Ag Committee and as a lobbyist for a leading crop insurance provider. Christy and her husband maintain close family ties to the family farms in Georgia and Kansas. And it's February, and we have Giving Hearts Day coming up, so you're in glorious red today. Thank you. Also on our panel, Wayne Stoskopf, who serves as Director of Public Policy at the National Corn Growers Association. He focuses on risk management and tax issues. He's the lead staff for the grower-led Risk Management and Transportation Action Team, which is leading National Corn Growers Association's policy work for the reauthorization of the Farm Bill. In previous roles, Wayne led staff-level negotiations for the commodities and crop insurance titles during the 2018 reauthorization of the Farm Bill. Wayne raised on his family's farm in Kansas. So, welcome, Christy and Wayne, and Katie Pinky asking those tough questions.
Or the softball questions. We'll see what we get today. Hopefully the farmers have some good questions to submit via the QR code. Again, if you don't know how to use the QR code, ask someone that's my age or younger, and they will certainly help you submit your questions. So Christy and Wayne, we're just gonna start off. First of all, thank you for coming to Fargo, North Dakota in February. Just guessing that's not a regular place that you often visit, so we appreciate you being here. We'll start off just 5-10 minutes. Go ahead and share a little bit about what's on your mind and what your organizations are doing right now actively.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. We are so fortunate in ASA to have a new president from this great state of North Dakota. Josh Gackle has already hit the ground running. We're very excited to have him on board, as well as just the great opportunity to work with Nancy Johnson and the team here. So, you know, with ASA, boy, we are working on farmers' behalf all the time, and that includes work on the Farm Bill, work on the checkoff, protecting the checkoff, to be clear. We're not lobbying with checkoff dollars, but we are also working to make sure that you all have access to crop protection products with all that's happening at EPA. A lot happening all the time, and we are always making sure that we're trying to represent our farmers to the best of our ability, making sure that you have a good, strong farm economy, access to markets, and also the ability to get your products to and from market.
Awesome, thank you. Wayne.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having us here. I recognize a lot of familiar faces, whether on stage or in the audience, the growers that join our risk management and transportation action team, or the Corn Board and have served in national leadership. Really appreciate all of the time that you take away from your families and your operations to come and inform us on what's happening on the ground. I think a lot of focus this morning is probably going to be on the Farm Bill, and something that Christy and I are both well informed and have a lot of history working within the committees and can give you our perspectives. But this is a time of year where it may feel a little dark and gray outside, but you still go and plant the seeds and get ready for the crop year, and that's what we're doing in the Farm Bill right now, is we're continuing to sow those seeds with legislators talking about our priorities and pushing for action as soon as possible. And I think we're seeing a lot of recognition of that. So the Farm Bill was extended last year, and we're in a good space now, but wanting to make sure that that's something that crosses the finish line as soon as possible. Also, a lot of work on the demand side. We grew a lot of corn last year, even though there were drought conditions, and we have a lot of places, both domestically and internationally, that we need to increase that corn grind so that prices, instead of trending down, can come back up and be something that you all can have success within this growing season and the marketing year afterwards.
We'll dive right into Farm Bill, since you both, I know have much to share. So we're about 8 months out, right, from having or needing maybe a Farm Bill or another extension, right? Share with us a little bit about what you're expecting and big and minor changes.
Sure, I'll just start off and say that the calendar is driving a lot of those conversations. We know the deadline is September 30th of 2024, and Congress doesn't typically act unless there's a deadline. So we know that date is coming up, but there's a big mark on the calendar, circle on the calendar for the November elections as well. And there's a lot of political pressure to get a farm bill done before the presidential campaigns, the Senate campaigns, the governor's races all really kind of plant their seeds over top and overlay everything. So there's this pressure for a bill to start moving quickly. We're still in the negotiations between the House and the Senate, Republicans and Democrats, but we're starting to see a lot of it come into picture. There's a big focus on strengthening the safety nets, both the commodity programs and the crop insurance programs, the trade promotion programs like the market access program and foreign market development have been oversubscribed and do a lot of great work with our partners that were on stage earlier. And they could do more in more places if there are increased funds. And also a big priority is to increase the voluntary conservation programs and make those more producer friendly. So I think we have a lot of high expectations for what the Farm Bill can deliver. We're just kind of working through those nuances of the priorities between the different legislatures.
And so I want to just maybe tack on one more key date that's circled on the calendar. You mentioned September 30th of this year. That's when the current extension expires. You mentioned the key date in November, Election Day, the general election. The other one, I feel like we have a big circle around March because of the appropriations deadlines that are ahead of us. We really need Congress to clear the decks as it relates to appropriations for this current fiscal year funding of the government, because they need to tackle other priorities, including Farm Bill, but also the next fiscal year government funding, which begins October 1st. So time is ticking. There are a lot of interests, I think, in seeing the decks cleared so that we can tackle Farm Bill in a meaningful way. We don't want just any Farm Bill. We want a new and improved Farm Bill. That's what we've been working toward for a couple of years now. We've had, both organizations have had opportunities to testify in Congress about our priorities and the opportunity to express soy, corn priorities as well on the Hill and with others. It's something we want to see get to the finish line in a meaningful way.
We have some questions coming in. I'm going to jump right into them. Can you explain how your organization conveys your organization's Farm Bill priority to ag committees working on the next Farm Bill?
There are a number of ways that we have tackled this. So I mentioned the hearings that we've had opportunities to testify in. Our members have had the opportunities to testify in. We have a fly-in coming up. We have a fly-in to DC a couple times a year. We've got our March fly-in coming up, and boy, it just might be very well timed to have folks walk the hills, work the Hill with North Dakota policymakers, but also with others across soy country and beyond to make sure they understand the need for a new and improved Farm Bill. We also actually like to tap into social media. It's a really great way for sharing priorities, sharing developments, sharing our views. So our communications team does a great job, and our farmers are very good about reposting. I saw Justin Sherlock earlier, and he talked about how easy it is to repost. It's a great way to get the message out. But then also, of course, writing letters. There are a lot of tools in our toolbox that we're always trying to make sure that we're leveraging in a positive way to make an impact for soy farmers.
I want to dig into the fly-in. So some farmers, raise your hand if you've ever been a part of a fly-in. Excellent. If you're sitting next to one and you didn't raise your hand, ask your neighbor. And then raise your hand if you don't know what a fly-in is. I see you. There you go. All right, go ahead and explain a little bit about what a fly-in is.
Sure. We lobbyists in Washington are there, boots on the ground all the time, but it is so valuable when we have farmers come into DC from farm country to share the message on Capitol Hill. We lobbyists help shape the message, provide the materials that you can use, but of course, the walking the Hill, making the connections with policymakers, those meetings on Capitol Hill are incredibly valuable. I worked on Capitol Hill for a number of years, and I remember my boss, who had worked in the House and in the Senate, always appreciated that much more when folks from back home were willing to take the time, the effort, spend the money on a plane ticket to come to DC. He made a point to sit down with them because it is so critically important to hear from farmers, the voters, in a state or a district. That's something that is just truly effective in our view. Now, if you don't have that ability to make the trip to DC, there are other ways that you can make an impact, and that's right here. That's right here at home. You can attend a town hall meeting. You can host a policymaker for a visit on your farm or your business. You can make these different connections with policymakers, state staff, district staff. All those different ways can make an impact.
And you don't just have to be the president of the North Dakota corn growers to go out to DC to make a difference. NCGA just recently hosted our Leadership Academy, where we're helping future advocates become advocates and go on to Capitol Hill the same week. So we'll provide kind of the policy expertise, but that real important piece that Christy mentioned is your story, what's happening on your farm, what's happening in your area. That is something that we can try to bridge, but it makes a bigger impact when folks know the community you're talking about. And then they can reach back out too when there's a farm tour within the district or within the state, and really bridge those connections overall. And we'll say other meetings, we have the association will host kind of our action team meetings, our committees, and we'll interact with the committee staff for the agriculture committees, sometimes on Zoom, but at the National Commodity Classic here in a couple weeks in Houston, we'll actually have some of those folks attending our meetings. So just taking part of your association will provide some of those opportunities for you to have those connections closer to home. And when you do go out to DC, you'll already have a familiar face on both sides of the table and make that conversation go even more smoothly.
And if I can add, I think the first speaker this morning talked about just the importance of sharing your voice, and that's really what we're talking about here, is sharing your voice in a meaningful way, making those connections. Policymakers they have so many demands on their attention, on their schedule, on where they need to be focusing time and attention on, and ag has to be a part of that, right? Y'all are very fortunate here in North Dakota. Some folks may have come in from Minnesota as well, and South Dakota. This is great. This is great ag country, and it is so critically important not just to keep the friends that you have and share your message with friends that you have on Capitol Hill, but then also beyond that, there are folks just who need to be reminded a new and improved Farm Bill is critically important this year. Don't forget about us, right? So there are a lot of different ways to share your voice, but it is critically important to make sure that happens.
We have a question from the audience. There's a possible proposal in the new Farm Bill to choose between insurance or other farm programs. What is the possibility of that being included in the Farm Bill?
Yeah, it's a proposal coming from the chairwoman of the Agriculture Committee, Debbie Stabenow, who has authored the two previous farm bills in that leadership role as the top Democrat on the Senate Ag Committee. And really, for your background, what she's looking at improving is the area-wide crop insurance products. So the supplemental coverage option, the enhanced coverage option, and even the margin policies. And that's expensive when you start to apply that to all growers. So their proposal is that you could have access to those improvements, so a little bit higher coverage and a little bit more of the federal portion of the premium would be covered if you choose not to take ARC or PLC, the Agriculture Risk Coverage Program or the Price Loss Coverage Program. If you don't make that choice, you would still have access to ARC and PLC and the kind of standard SCO or ECO. It is very much a proposal, one that for some growers in probably more of the Eastern Corn Belt, that may have made sense the last couple of years when the commodity programs were not expected to trigger in a meaningful way. But we're in a different price environment now, and so that would be even a harder choice. So we're evaluating the policy. I know that the soy growers are, others in the ag community are taking a look at it. But what we're hearing from other corners is we can have those improvements on the crop insurance side and have Title I without them being pitted against each other. And that's, of course, going to be something that we're pushing for more than having those tough choices. But we'll see what kind of roads the negotiations take in the next couple weeks, but it is absolutely one that you should be thinking about. And if it's something you think these programs shouldn't be compared to each other at all or linked in that way, let us know. Let your associations know. That's the type of feedback we need as negotiations are really live right now.
Both programs, Title I, Farm Safety Net, and crop insurance are critically important. We want to make sure that farmers have meaningful access to both. I think what's good about seeing a proposal like this is we are seeing some movement. We're seeing more discussion, more activity around the Farm Bill. So whether you like this proposal or not, we are starting to have more conversations about what might be in the mix, which is a good thing.
Go ahead and keep using the QR code to submit your questions. This is an easy way. We don't have to put a mic on you. You can just submit your own questions. So another question. Aside from the Farm Bill, what main policy issues is your organization focused on this election year? Go ahead.
I'll start with biofuels. You know, the domestic demand is so critically important for corn growers, but that also the overall bioeconomy is important for folks up and down the value stream. I know there's a lot of our partners here today. And really looking at things like year-round E15 should be a slam dunk for Congress and the administration, continuing to push that message and to have more of our fuels made here at home with our domestic products. Also looking towards the future of biofuels with the Next Generation Fuels Act, which will continue to lay the groundwork with the automakers and the manufacturers of our kind of oil and gasoline to have higher blends of ethanol in those markets and continue to grow demand domestically. On the demand side, we're also continuing to work on the trade side. We need our international customers, and Mexico is one of our biggest customers, and we're having a little bit of an issue right now with them and their proposed kind of bans on any GM products. And we need to have equal access into that market and continue that long into the future. So we're actually having a challenge through the USMCA process. That's something that corn growers and the US government have put forward. So we're working with our friends to the north, the Canadians, to push back against that type of not based in science proposal so that we can continue to have those critical markets for growers. And even if not a lot of corn from North Dakota is going into Mexico, that proposal would have a massive impact on just the overall trade relationship, and things like the basis in a lot of different communities would get skewed really quickly. So we want to make sure that a rising tide rises all boats and that we can continue to have a brighter future on the trade side.
So to piggyback on what Wayne talked about, biofuels trade, critically important for us as well. And the checkoff has been instrumental for soy in opening up the biofuels markets and opening up trade opportunities and market opportunities around the world. And it has also been successful in many other ways. And unfortunately, what we've seen just in the last year or so is very serious legislative attack on checkoffs in general in Congress. We believe that the farmer-funded, farmer-led checkoff provides an incredible return on investment for farmers, $12.34 for every dollar invested. So very meaningful in terms of market development and trade development from biofuels and global markets and other areas, bio-based products, to name a few. And we have been working diligently to protect the checkoff from these legislative attacks. We defeated soundly an amendment that popped up this fall on an ag appropriations bill. The particular amendment I'm referring to received 49 votes in support, 377 votes against, thanks to your help and many others who are soy checkoff and beyond, soy family and beyond, if you will. And so protecting the checkoff, like I said, we're not lobbying with checkoff dollars, but certainly we are lobbying to protect the checkoff from threats and attacks. We want to make sure that that remains viable and continues to unlock opportunities. The other area I want to mention that's a priority for ASA is making sure that you all have the access to crop protection products that you need in order to produce a crop every year. We've worked with EPA, we continue to work with EPA to provide feedback on proposals they have made to try and bring EPA into compliance with Endangered Species Act requirements. We have provided a lot of feedback in a lot of different ways, written comments, but also meetings, hosting EPA on the farm by some of our farmers. We are very concerned about what has been proposed so far and what might lie ahead, and we want to continue sharing our voice to ensure you have access to the tools that you need to control pests.
Thank you. Questions coming in. Provide us an update on the RFS. How does it stand today and what might be next?
Sure, the renewable fuel standard is the law of the land, and we have some volume limitations kind of built in, and we've seen growth exceed kind of some of the RFS original kind of proposals. And what we have coming up next is what I mentioned earlier was the Next Generation Fuels Act to really expand the volumes and types of biofuels that can be in that encouraged in kind of production. Within the RFS and kind of society, you've got to set the standard future looking. So it takes time to work with the automakers to allow for higher blends, to actually get the infrastructure built in as well to deliver it on the fuel side. So we're working in both kind of the policy space, but also on that infrastructure front as corn growers, but also with USDA, there's infrastructure programs to try to get the fuel available so we can meet demand where it's at, and that's locally. I think with the pandemic, you saw a lot of folks really worrying about not only fuel prices when they crashed, but then they rose with inflation. And so there's an opportunity here for us to look towards the future and say, where do we want to be? And there's a lot of conversation about electric vehicles and also electric vehicle infrastructure, but that is not a conversation that's happening quickly. It may feel like it in the press, but the adoption is much slower. We have renewable fuels now. We can grow those. We have the ability to produce more and to get it into the fuel system. So let's go ahead and tackle that and continue to support our domestic producers of the ag products. I think there's also a lot of attention on sustainable aviation fuel and what's going to happen next there. And so we've got the opportunity within our automobiles to set the standards, but also working really closely with the federal government and members of Congress to make sure that the ag products like corn and soybeans are considered part of that sustainable definition that can be used for sustainable aviation fuel. If that is a market that is going to take off like some predict, we want to make sure that we're engaged in that table and in those conversations.
We want to make sure that we are looking at our market opportunities in the biofuel space, much like you are. Let's make sure that feedstocks, commodity feedstocks, are eligible for these different pathways. We are seeing, in addition to SAF, the sustainable aviation fuel, we are looking at maritime opportunities in soy and seeing more use in the rail industry and opportunities there for biofuels. So, it's an exciting world right now as you think about the energy opportunities. And gosh, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, I was here in August with North Dakota soy and got to just better understand how much of an energy and ag state North Dakota is. Y'all are truly at the intersection of it all, and I think are well positioned to just embrace all of this for greater opportunity.
A farmer question we have, again, submit your questions with the QR code. How do your organizations work with the EPA and the regulations they set that impact farmers?
EPA is so impactful to what you do. It's not just the Endangered Species Act compliance piece that I mentioned earlier, it's the biofuels RFS piece, it's WOTUS. We have open lines with communication on a regular basis with EPA. I have a team member who I think just sits, he writes so many letters, so many comment letters, and thinks about how are we doing everything that we can to coordinate an approach, especially on the crop protection side, in a way that is beneficial to farmers, not just in soy country, but beyond. So, you know, I think that we have all the opportunity to connect with EPA and hear directly from them and work with them on a number of issues, not just maybe one or two.
I'd say that the EPA Administrator Michael Regan has done a good job of trying to get out into the countryside and to hear from folks directly. But one of his staff is the kind of ag person at the EPA, Rod Snyder, and that has to be one of the toughest jobs in Washington, D.C., is to explain what's happening at the EPA to farmers and ranchers in rural America, but also to take that input and coalesce it and provide it in a meaningful way back to the administrator and their team that's actually writing the regulations and drafting it. When we talk about hot seats, that is one of the hottest, and it is a really tough job because of that contention. We know that there's an impact on your day-to-day operations or just the viability of the future of your operations. And often it's not always just the regulations, but it's the court system. So we've got to be engaged in what's happening when EPA is getting sued for not doing enough from the environmental aspects or the Conservation Act kind of approach, and really activists suing the federal government to do more. And a lot of times the courts are where you see the mandates and also products being pulled off of the shelves because of the court system. So the EPA also has a kind of a multifaceted approach, and we've got to work with not only the ag liaison, but their lawyers and with the administrator, all of the above, to talk about the impacts the regulations will have on your farm. And when they don't get it right, like some of the WOTUS regulations, I'd say all of ag goes all in, and we'll have campaigns and calls to action and say, this is the time to weigh in. And it really takes your voice to the regulators, but also your members of Congress, to really get attention and to flood those. We know ag in rural America is kind of losing population. So when we're going up against some of those bigger activist groups, we really need everybody to weigh in as much as possible.
Excellent. That sharing your voice, like we've been talking about, and getting active. Share a little bit with us on what's being done on the policy front to encourage more trade agreements that are supportive of U.S. farmers and agriculture.
So I think it's a tough time right now. It's a tough time right now. We're certainly talking about it. We're encouraging, but I think we're also a bit on defense as well. We have seen a lot of attention placed on the soybean top export market, and that is China. And we are exporting over 50%, 60% of our beans globally, every year, and the bulk of that goes to China. There's some real concerns, I think, about how do we maintain China as our top market, but how do we also expand and diversify trade opportunities as well. So we are continuing to put eggs in multiple baskets. And a couple of ways that I think are really helpful for us doing that, in addition to educating our policymakers about just the export landscape, I think one is the investment that we're calling for in trade promotion resources in the Farm Bill. So these, if you hear the acronyms, MAP and FMD, Market Access Program, Farm Market Development Program, these are dollars, federal dollars, that help unlock opportunities. That combined with soy checkoff dollars, the farmer funds that you are providing that go in part to USB, to USEC, to do this work around the world to open up markets. Those are two powerful funding streams to help us do a lot of work around the world, even if you're not seeing a free trade agreement name slapped on it, right? I think that there are ways that we can be effective in the trade space to diversify and expand trade with the use of federal and farmer dollars, even if it's not necessarily an FTA that crosses the finish line.
So we have a follow-up question to that, and you said it's been a tough time. Why has there been a decline? Why have we seen a decline in the FTAs and obviously the impact?
I think just a lot of activity, sensitive activity happening globally. You've seen the conflicts around the world. You've seen alliances being formed. You've seen, politics at work. I think there are a lot of different reasons and a lot of different priorities placed on different items. Wayne, what insights would you share?
Sure, I would say that what we've seen is a shift away from kind of free trade in general and the power of free trade to a more protectionist environment. And that's with both political parties. We had things like the Trans-Pacific Partnership Program that would have really unlocked a lot of customers in Asia and even Australia, New Zealand. And it was not popular at all about 10 years ago in kind of the presidential campaigns. So if the members at the top of the party are talking negatively about trade, it really starts to impact kind of all the conversations down below. And so we've got a lot of work to do to just talk about the importance of increasing trade. I will say the conflict in Ukraine and Russia has also really showed the importance of a lot of our markets being diversified. So folks are wanting to look at reliable suppliers, folks that have a transportation system that is consistent when the weather holds, and we can get products both down to market and then inputs back up. So things like our inland waterways system are a strength of the United States. Our rail capacity is another place where when we see those supply constraints become issues, they become really a focal point on those because we need to get our products to market. We need to continue to be that reliable supplier. And this last year is a great example. We're really efficient at growing crops here in the United States in a sustainable way, in a way that can sell. We just have to make sure that we get those to markets when they're needed. So the next couple of years may not be the best in the trade negotiation space, but we've laid the groundwork through those programs like MAP and FMD, through the trade missions to other countries. And if you've hosted a trade mission, either on your farm or a local community, those relationships matter. When folks need a product kind of immediately, and there's some other part of the country or the world that's cut off from them, they're going to turn back to the United States, and we have to be ready. We have a good story to share, and our folks like at the U.S. Grants Council, USEC, and others are sharing that story and making sure that we're top of mind when things either turn negatively in one part of the world or when maybe the price of the dollar comes down a little bit and our products become a little bit more competitive at those ports.
We've talked about some key dates already in the year, right? March, September, November. So what do you think the pace of legislation will be out of Congress in the coming months leading up to the presidential elections? And how do your teams keep up?
There is always a lot happening all the time. And, whether it's introduced legislation or an amendment or, a letter, you name it, there are always opportunities to engage with the Hill and respond to the Hill, work with our farmers to ensure we are on track and aligned with ASA priorities and messaging. It's a lot to stay on top of. I know I'm very fortunate to lead a very talented team of lobbyists. We have folks tracking our priority issues, our priority needs, as well as farmer needs on a regular basis and weighing in there. To the first part of that question, the election, pace of legislation related to this election year. Gosh, I think every time we have an election year, particularly a presidential election year, things just get more heated, and we see the policy priorities on the Republican and the Democratic side of the aisle pop up in various ways, especially as it relates to campaigns. At some point, it will become even more exceedingly difficult to get bipartisan legislation across the finish line, but it can happen. And I think in agriculture, we are very fortunate that the Farm Bill is typically very bipartisan, and I think all the leaders are committed to seeing that happen again this year.
And I'll say two periods where things may slow down in DC, but they will heat up in your home states are August and October. You think of the traditional August recess when members take off kind of 4 to 5 weeks to go back and be in their districts and their states. That will continue this year. There may be some pressure to shorten it a little bit on the front end, but a lot of folks want to get back and do their official business, but also campaign. What's unusual in an even-numbered year is that the entire month of October, Congress is not scheduled to be in session as well. So really, you kind of leave at around September 30th, and then up until the election, that kind of 5 or 6 weeks period, there will not be members of Congress in DC. They will be off campaigning mostly, but also doing some official work. So you'll hear sometimes, a lot of folks pinning their hopes on the lame duck session after the Congress for a period where maybe some things can get done after the threat of the voters holding them to account will pass. That's only 5 weeks between kind of after the election and Christmas and New Year's where folks will be back in DC. So if your hope is to get something like a farm bill done in the lame duck, it's got to be started well before that. It's got to pass either in the spring or summer so you're in a position for it to cross the finish line in the lame duck. We can't wait until November 6th or 7th to then get our efforts in and to hope that would happen in that period. So the pace may look different depending on the month of who's in town and who's not, but know that the staff there are working hard and our teams are working hard every step of the way to make sure that we're in the best position whenever that legislative activity is occurring.
All right, how do you feel the U.S. is, this is a couple questions coming up here. I'll skip around. What is being, no, I'm skipping down. Yes, okay, we're going on the trade one. How do you feel the U.S. is being perceived in the trade world? Are there areas of concern that our organizations should be working on towards repairing? Obviously, we touched on this in the earlier session. Anything you want to add on the policy side?
Sure, I'll say that, it's a lot of times you got to keep your friends close and your enemies closer, but I don't want to say that any of these are enemies, but we're seeing conflicts within the USMCA, kind of former NAFTA, with both Canada on dairy and then Mexico with corn. And a lot of this is kind of testing that new trade agreement. It will be under a kind of a mid-year review in a couple years, and so there's already negotiations, I think, leading up to 2025 and 2026, and that's our closest trading partners. They're our friends just right across the border and south of the border as well, and so that's something that we've got to stay at the table and stay engaged with them to make sure that both sides are being heard and that we make actual progress on both the dairy side and corn. And all of those is set up, if those are not resolved, we'll see other folks take advantage of those either loopholes or kind of bad actions and apply that in other places. And so we've got to stop it really right at the head with our closest trading partners and allies.
I don't necessarily want to talk concerns, but I do want to take an opportunity just to compliment the work of USEC in this space. You heard from Roz Leak earlier. Monty Peterson, who is here, is former chair of USEC. The lines of communication that we keep open with USEC are really, really helpful, really important, because there may be a development on the world stage, market access, trade, you name it. And we have some type of takeaway or action item from that we need to pursue with USDA or the U.S. Trade Representative's Office or Capitol Hill and keep them informed about what's happening in farm country. And so that open line of communication for us is really, really helpful to our effectiveness that we provide, that we're able to achieve. And I think, too, because USEC is so plugged in all around the globe, as is Grains Council and others, I think that is extremely helpful for us to pick up challenges, issues in real time and work with them closely on, all right, what makes sense? Is there a policy angle on this or not? So kudos to USEC.
We'll wrap up with a few more questions. How do you think the next Farm Bill encourages innovation and sustainability? We've touched on it. Anything you want to add?
Sure. I think the chairman on the House Ag Committee has said innovation is a word that not only in principle he wants to add to every title and really program of the Farm Bill, but in reality, how do we encourage and spur innovation and unlock technology? We know that, for example, corn, we've been on a positive increase trend yield. We want to see that continue despite the challenges in weather. But things like precision ag are a hot topic right now, whether it's beginning farmers having access to loans to adopt more precision technology on the front end, or concerns about what that data might look like on the back end. Are there ways that we can protect data from your farms, but also spur research into some areas that are also cutting edge, and ways that we can continue to further expand our ability to be sustainable and reduce some of the inputs, and continue that positive trend. So there's a lot of different components, a little bit in the loan space, a little bit in the research space, some in the crop insurance arena as well. So we'll see innovation and certainly sustainability throughout multiple titles and a lot of conversations in this next Farm Bill.
In addition to leading ASA's government affairs team, I'm a farm kid. And so I hear not only from ASA farmers, but I also hear from my family the importance of sustainability, but through different lenses. So sustainability in a sense that everybody in this room, I expect, wants to be proud of what you pass down to the next generation. That means economic sustainability too, right? And so we want to make sure that there's that protection, that safety net for farmers in the next Farm Bill. So in that sense, I think that the next Farm Bill hopefully will have those pieces of improvement in the Title I farm safety net, but also, as Wayne mentioned earlier, the voluntary incentive-based approach to conservation programs. I think that is going to continue as well. So I think we can get a new and improved Farm Bill, hopefully sooner rather than later, right?
Why do farmers have to choose between ARC and PLC? And can a program be created that gives coverage both ways?
Well, I'll start by saying add another layer on that. If you choose PLC, you have access to some crop insurance products like the SCO, but if you choose ARC, you don't. That's a question we get a lot, is why are these all pitted against each other? Why can't we have both and just pay us the higher of, take us out of the equation? And really, back in the 2014 Farm Bill negotiations that started in 2011, 2012, there were competing ideas of what to do after direct payments. And there was a revenue-based product, the agriculture risk coverage product, that was created to really capture downside risk as we're moving from a high environment to price environment to a lower price environment. And the price loss coverage program was set to be kind of the floor of if prices really dramatically drop and stay sustained at low prices, to provide support there. And as Congress often does when faced with difficult decisions, they kind of water everything down. So both programs are not really functioning as well as they were intended in 2014, and we've seen a lot of events in the last 10 years. So there are ways to strengthen those. The problem with kind of doing a combined program, or one that would take off some of the producer burden, is that the budget counters, the bean counters, actually say that it would cost more money. So folks are kind of in this period of saying, can we make improvements that improve individual programs despite whatever region or crop that you may grow, or is it just kind of keep the same programs but just kind of pay above and make it a little bit more simpler? And Congress often will make things more complex before making it simple. And this Farm Bill is one that's starting to pop up, but it may be a broader conversation for the next 5-year Farm Bill after that.
We are hoping that the right package of improvements can be incorporated into the Farm Bill. As I mentioned before, soybeans, we're the poster child for Title I reform. We lived through the China trade war, and we have all experienced a number of market disruptions, economic disruptions through the life of the current Farm Bill. We want to see improvements. That's got to happen for our farmers, because we know there's volatility ahead. We know that economic disruption, the potential still exists in the life of this Farm Bill, and we just think it's a better idea to plan and provide for a better farm safety net than knowing we're going to have to beg for ad hoc assistance if and when that next economic disaster strikes. So we really hope that a good package can be pulled together.
We have more questions, and we're also out of time. So if you have more questions, please speak. I think you both are going to be around for a bit. Please speak with Christy and Wayne. Thank you for joining us. Any closing comments that you want to add about having these farmers engage on policy making?
I think just a huge thank you for being here, because half the battle is being informed. When you're informed, you understand how important it is for you to be engaged. And I will tell you what, from my bird's eye view, you were so well represented by Nancy Johnson and North Dakota Soy, and just so many good people in this state in agriculture. And we just appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
And I'll layer on top of that that you're also really well represented in Washington, D.C. You have members on the Ag committees, the Ag Appropriations Committee, and you may have a small congressional delegation compared to, say, California, but you have a lot of folks like Senator Hoeven who are very intensely focused on your issues and carry a bigger voice into those rooms and are well positioned both on the Farm Bill and appropriations to make an impact. And we work closely with that office and really value the partnerships. And thank you again for having us here today.
Thank you. Round of applause.